In the Orisha tradition, death is not an end but a sacred passage. The soul does not vanish, it transitions guided by ritual, memory, and the hands of our community. One of the most important ceremonies in this journey is known as Itutu. The Itutu ritual ensures that this passage is made with peace and dignity. Itutu, sometimes called Ituto, is the ceremony performed after the passing of an Orisha initiate. Its purpose is both simple and profound: to guide the spirit into peace, to return the sacred aché they carried, and to remind us that life and death are threads of the same divine fabric. The Itutu ritual represents one of the most structurally complex and spiritually critical ceremonies within the Ocha Ifa religious system, also known as Lukumi or Santeria. This rite is not merely a mourning period or a general prayer service. It is a mandatory formal act of spiritual administration required for all individuals who have received formal initiation into the priesthood of the Orisha, Ocha, or Santo. The intrinsic necessity of the Itutu stems from the profound spiritual contract established during the initiation ceremony, asiento. This contract binds the devotee's spirit, Ori, to the Orisha through consecrated physical objects known as the Fundamento de Santo, specifically sacred stones, OTA, and tools, herramientas, housed in a lidded vessel, sopera. These objects constitute an altar where the Orisha is actively present and can be addressed. Death, as the ultimate transition, triggers a mandatory bureaucratic procedure to formally dissolve these earthly spiritual ties. The Itutu ritual is the precise mechanism for achieving the spiritual objectives of detachment, evolution, and elevation for the deceased initiate. Without this critical ceremony, the soul of the deceased may remain burdened by the aché, divine power, contained within their sacred material possessions, potentially hindering their spiritual progress or creating spiritual instability within the lineage. The Itutu acts as the formal dismantling ceremony, ensuring the consecrated spiritual life is concluded according to divine mandate. Historical and cultural lineages, Yoruba to Lukumi. The religious framework that gave rise to Itutu successfully navigated the traumatic displacement of the transatlantic slave trade, adapting and thriving in the Americas while strongly retaining core Yoruba philosophies. The survival of this tradition, whether called Yoruba, Lukumi, Santeria, or Candomblé, depended on its ability to provide ample philosophic means for comprehending and ultimately transcending the powers that periodically threatened to dissolve them. The diasporic religion maintained fundamental principles of Yoruba cosmology, particularly regarding mortality and the ancestral connection. All ceremonies, including the Itutu, emphasize paying homage to the ancestors, Egun or Muertos, before addressing the Orishas, confirming the spiritual hierarchy. In this tradition, death, Isinku, is viewed as a transitional process from the human world to the spirit world, requiring elaborate and precise rituals to ensure the spiritual realm accepts the soul. Itutu provides the specialized high-level mechanism required for this ultimate transition for the initiated priest or priestess. Let's see now the esoteric theology of Itutu. From coolness to detachment, the word Itutu possesses a profound semantic duality, operating simultaneously as a deep ethical concept in West Africa and a highly specific funerary technology in the diaspora. Understanding this conceptual origin is vital to grasping the ritual's purpose. Origin and philosophical coolness, Itutu Iwa. In Yoruba land, the concept of Itutu is fundamentally an aesthetic and moral ideal. It translates primarily as coolness or composure, reflecting an individual's self-control and dignity, Iwa, in the face of life's turbulence. This composure is not viewed as a passive state, but as a cultivated mindset, achieved by understanding and accepting the limits of human control, thereby resisting agitation, anger, or vanity. This philosophical Itutu is intrinsically linked to Ashe, spiritual power, and good character. Robert Ferris Thompson, a key scholar in this field, demonstrated that this ideal of cool informs both Yoruba art, visible in the calm, collected faces of sculpture, and human deportment. It is a life philosophy that demands a consistent state of emotional balance and dignity. Diasporic transformation, detachment and elevation. In the Afro-Cuban tradition, Lukumi, the term Itutu has been specifically applied to the post-mortem ritual. where its meaning pivots from general composure to focused spiritual administration. Here, Itutu is defined as detachment, evolution, elevation. This application represents a practical theological continuation of the original philosophy. The philosophical Itutu is interpreted as the prerequisite for the ritual Itutu. A life lived with spiritual coolness means the initiate has already mastered emotional detachment from transient worldly concerns. The funerary rite then becomes the final, institutionalized affirmation of that spiritual state. It is the means by which the system supports the soul in demonstrating the ultimate composure, the detachment from the physical body, and the consecrated aché it housed. The deliberate naming of the funerary rite as Itutu ensures the diaspora maintains the semantic link to the core Yoruba value system. This connection facilitates the initiate's transition from an earthly servant of the Orisha to a recognized ancestor, Egun, capable of reincarnation or conferring blessings upon the living lineage. Now we turn to the purpose and prerequisites of the mandatory dissolution of the fundamento. The principal purpose of the Itutu is the formal dissolution of the reciprocal spiritual bond between the deceased initiate and their consecrated Orisha objects. This process is complex because the objects, the ota, tools, and housing vessels, are not mere symbols, but are considered the physical locus of the Orisha's presence. Let's see why the necessity of separation. An initiate receives their fundamento de santo, which typically includes sacred stones, aché, and tools, herramientas, stored in a lidded ceramic sopera, or, for certain deities like Olokun, a glazed water vessel known as a tinaja. Everything that went into forming these objects, the leaves, metals, incantations, and sacrifices, is part of the object's secret and the Orisha's localized power. When the human conduit, the initiate, dies, the spiritual connection that maintained the stability of this concentrated aché is broken. The theological imperative of Itutu is to prevent spiritual entropy. If the aché contained in the ota is left unadministered, it risks becoming spiritually inert, destabilized, or dangerous due to the absence of its keeper. The Itutu ritual provides the means to formally sever the ori, the personal consciousness and destiny, of the deceased from the Orisha's physical vessel. This ensures the Orisha itself is not abandoned or spiritually confused by the death of its primary servant. The ritual decision dictates the fate of the objects, which cannot simply be inherited or discarded. The prerequisites for the Itutu are strict. It must be performed for all individuals who have undergone the Ocha initiation rite. Due to the high-level nature of the procedures, the ceremony is overseen by an oba, or master of ceremonies, also called oriat. The oba is responsible for directing the complex ritual procedures, including the critical high-level divination that determines the destiny of the sacred objects and the path of the deceased soul. Furthermore, the ceremony must adhere to the foundational tradition that all Orisha rites begin with the moyuba, a chanted prayer honoring God, the deceased ancestors, Egun, and the Orishas, thereby emphasizing that the initiate is transitioning into the realm of the collective lineage. The user query specifically asks about the time frame for the ritual. The timing of Itutu is dictated by spiritual urgency rather than a calendar date, mandating execution during the immediate liminal window following death. Let's see now the critical time frame in divine urgency. Unlike certain Hindu funeral rites which span days or weeks, the Itutu ceremony must be performed quickly, typically before the physical burial, isinku. The spiritual requirement is one of immediate action, because the ritual is designed to detach the soul from its body and its material aché. If the Itutu is performed too late, the spirit may be burdened or retained by its material possessions, potentially hindering the evolution necessary for it to successfully join the ancestors, Egun. The necessity of completing the spiritual clearance precedes the physical interment. This specialized administrative rite contrasts with the general community mourning, which often includes a longer 9-day grieving ritual involving prayers and singing. The Itutu must be concluded during the liminal phase when the spirit is still closely tethered to the earthly realm, ensuring a smooth transition. Next, the unique divination of Itutu. A crucial procedural component of the Itutu is the execution of a highly specific divination rite utilizing the dialogan, cowrie shells. While the dialogan system is employed widely, Its application in Itutu is structurally distinct. Typically in complex sessions like in ETA, initiation divination, the cowrie shells are cast multiple times to confirm the reading and determine the resolution. However, during the Itutu funerary ceremony, the dialogan are thrown only once to the mat. The spiritual significance of this single throw is immense. Standard divination relies on comparison and secondary throws to confirm the spiritual diagnosis, ire, good fortune, or ibi, misfortune, and the source. The singular unrepeated throw in Itutu symbolizes finality. The resulting odu, one of the 256 patterns of esoteric knowledge, is interpreted by the Oba, or rite, as the immediate, definitive, and non-negotiable decree from the Orisha. This odu reveals the precise ibo, ritual resolution, required for the deceased soul, and most critically dictates the fate of the sacred fundamento. The single throw acts as the deceased initiates final divinely sanctioned instruction regarding the administration of their spiritual estate. The core rites of separation and closure. The operational core of the Itutu involves ritual acts that physically and symbolically sever the spiritual ties holding the initiate to their material existence and consecrated power. Honoring the threshold, Igun and Moyuba. As with all major ceremonies, the Itutu must commence by formally honoring the spiritual hierarchy. The opening invocation, the Moyuba, praises God and formally honors the lineage of deceased ancestors, Igun, before invoking the Orishas. This initial focus is essential, confirming that the deceased initiate is formally entering the sacred collective of the ancestors, signaling the beginning of their new status in the spirit world. The symbolic destruction of worldly bonds. One of the most profound acts of the Itutu is the symbolic destruction of a ritual vessel. This often involves breaking a pot, sometimes specifically a tinaja, a glazed water vessel. This act carries immense esoteric weight. The breaking of the clay pot depicts that the human body is no longer the dwelling place of the soul. Furthermore, it signifies the comprehensive ending of all worldly attachments, relationships, and bonds held by the initiate. The symbolic destruction extends beyond the physical body to encompass the initiate's specific spiritual identity, Ori, as an earthly priest. The shattering of the material container confirms that the personal spiritual contract, tied to that specific life, has been irrevocably terminated. This formal declaration ensures the Ori is fully released to pursue its elevation and liberation, fulfilling the ultimate goal of the Itutu ritual. The movement of water from the pot, prior to its breaking, is often used to symbolize the passing of time, emphasizing the finality of the moment when the flow stops and the vessel is destroyed. The fate of the fundamento, sacred objects. The practical climax of the Itutu is the determination and execution of the final disposition of the sacred objects, ota and herramientas. The Oba, or rite, oversees the process of formally raising or dismounting the Orisha from the deceased's sopera. The destiny of these potent objects is entirely dependent upon the odu revealed in the single throw of the dialogan. This divine mandate provides several possible outcomes. 1. Burial with the initiate. The odu may mandate that the ota and herramientas be buried with the initiate. This outcome signifies total spiritual closure, returning the concentrated aché to the earth from whence it came, and confirming that the spiritual service of the individual priest is finished. 2. Return to nature. The objects may be mandated for return to their natural environment, a river, the sea, or the forest, depending on the Orisha associated with the fundamento. 3. Transfer within the Rama. Crucially, the odu may authorize the ritual transfer of the fundamento to a direct descendant, a designated priest, or another worthy member of the same Rama, genealogical line of descent. This potential transfer illuminates a critical function of the Itutu as a mechanism for lineage preservation. While the ritual ensures detachment for the individual soul, the aché contained within the consecrated stones is not necessarily destroyed. If the divine will deems the power viable and necessary for the spiritual house, the Itutu enables its safe and ritually correct redirection. This administrative decision protects the community from the destabilization that would occur if potent sacred objects were mishandled or misused, while simultaneously ensuring that the spiritual resources of the Rama persist despite the loss of one member. The Itutu ritual is an indispensable pillar of the Afro-Cuban Orisha faith. unifying profound philosophical principles with highly specific, mandatory funerary procedures. Its origin is dual, rooted in the Yoruba ethical concept of Itutu, coolness and dignity, which mandates emotional self-control in life, and crystallized in the Lukumi ritual of Itutu, detachment and elevation, which institutionalizes that composure in death. The ritual serves as the ultimate administrative procedure required to formally conclude the spiritual contract between an initiated priest, priestess, and the Orisha they served. Its purpose is fourfold. 1. To facilitate the soul's evolution, by formally detaching it from its material burdens. 2. To ensure the deceased is accepted into the collective of recognized ancestors. 3. To obtain a definitive, non-negotiable mandate, Odu, through a unique, single-throw divination process regarding the disposition of the sacred fundamento. 4. To correctly administer the powerful aché within the consecrated objects, either by returning it to nature or transferring it to a new keeper within the spiritual lineage, Rama. The critical role of the Oba or Oriat, and the urgency of performing the rite within the liminal post-mortem timeframe underscore the high stakes of this ceremony. The breaking of the ritual vessel seals the physical severance, allowing the spirit to transcend its earthly existence and complete its final journey toward elevation. Itutu teaches us that every ending is also a beginning, that the breath we take today will one day return to the winds of our Orisha, and that when our time comes, our community, our ancestors, and our divinities will not abandon us. They will guide us home. May we live with that truth in our hearts so that when our own Itutu is called, we too will pass in peace surrounded by light. The Itutu ritual reminds us that even in death, life is never lost, it is transformed. Ashe flows back into the universe. Ancestors rise to greet us and the Orisha guide us home. Let this truth inspire us to live with purpose, with respect for tradition, and with faith in the eternal cycle. If this message touched your spirit, share it with someone that might need to hear this, or drop a comment on your experience with Itutu rites. Honor your ancestors, and continue walking in the light of the Orisha. Ashe. Until next time, Oshinoju Odu signing out.